The New York Mets blew a game that they were winning 6-1 against the Houston Astros, and as a result, Tylor Megill has been optioned to AAA. What is next for the Mets pitching staff? I'll break it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. The New York Mets had a series in hand on Saturday thanks to their unbelievable lineup that continues to just crush against good starting pitchers. Framber Valdez has not had the best year, but still, it's a guy that carries a lot of name recognition, and the Mets jumped all over him, and it was the back of their lineup that did it. In the second inning, you had 6, 7, 8, 9 start a rally that netted the Mets 5 runs. Really impressive stuff. Tyrone Taylor draws a leadoff walk. Mark Vientos ripped one through Jose Altuve. I say through because he hit one right at Altuve, but 100 miles per hour off the bat. It was a 1 or a 2 hopper. He had no chance on it, ate him up, and they ruled it a hit. That put runners at the corners, nobody out. Jose Iglesias, who went 3 for 4, starting against the lefty with a couple of doubles, if I'm not mistaken here. So he hits a chopper, and horrible play by Framber Valdez, trying to backhand flip one to the plate, and he had no shot at the plate anyway. His only play would have been to set his feet and try to fire to first, but just an awful defensive play. That scores a run. Then you have Harrison Bader from the 9-hole gets a base hit. That scores another one. And then you turn it over to the top of the lineup. Francisco Lindor strikes out. Brandon Nimmo drives in, runs. And then Pete Alonso singles him in. 5-1 Mets. So you're sitting there in this great spot if you're Tylor Megill. You got a 5-1 lead. And then even better, after he got through the third, Mark Vientos hits a solo home run, his 10th of the year. 108.8 miles per hour off the bat, 429 feet dead center. His power is legit. It's so cool when you see these guys that, I've now been doing this show since the 2019 season, and there hasn't been a ton of prospects that have come up and deliver. These are the guys that I started covering back in 2019 when I first did this show. And to have done these shows about Mark Vientos and 2021 and 2022, talking about a kid that had 40 home run power, and now to see it actually start to be realized at the big league level, it's really awesome. And he just continues to crush. So I could not be happier for Mark Vientos and what he's been doing and how he has been solidifying himself as the third baseman of the future for the New York Mets. Brett Baty's got to figure his own stuff out at some point, because the Mets could, of course, move Vientos to first, but the way he's played defensively, the way he's hitting, Mark Vientos is the guy at that position until further notice. So again, getting back to Megill, you're sitting there with a 6-1 lead through the first 3 innings. And he was at 43 pitches, comfortable pitch count. This was a start the Mets desperately needed length out of Tylor Megill. Gives up a home run early, but looked good other than that. 4th inning was a disaster, and you needed to put up a 0 in that inning after the Mets had just really grabbed the momentum of the game. You put up a scoreless 4th, the Astros might go out quietly. But the Astros are a good team that has been putting together really good at-bats over the last couple weeks and has been as hot as the Mets, really. And they got to Megill. 3 hits, Megill hit a batter, and all of a sudden, 6-4. Now, Megill was still at just 65 pitches through 4 innings, though. So, again, you needed length. You needed him to get through 6. If Tylor Megill got through 6 innings and gave up the 4 runs, I would have said, you know what? It was a good start. Not a great start, but hey, at least he gave the team length. 5th inning was the inning to me that I was completely out on Megill. Because even though he put up a 0, it took everything. And it took, honestly, Francisco Alvarez willing him to strand those runners. Francisco Alvarez working really hard behind the dish to make it happen. After every pitch, trying to pump him up with confidence. Mound visits, like everything he could have gotten through it, because basically what happens, he walks Jose Altuve on 4 pitches. They have first base open when Yordan Alvarez comes up. Why the Mets had a mound visit and tried to talk strategy about how to not pitch to Alvarez when he is the tying run at the plate, when you could have just stuck up four fingers and sent him on his merry way to first, is beyond me. But instead, they waste everyone's time as Megill throws a bunch of curveballs that he has no inkling of even offering at. He takes his base. And then Megill's got to pitch his way out of it, and he does. Okay? He gets two big strikeouts. But again, Alvarez really had to get it out of him. And these batters are fouling off pitches. He just can't put guys away. 8 pitches to Yainer Diaz, 7 to Jake Myers, gets the strikeouts, but 15 pitches right there. All of a sudden, you really don't have any prayer of getting through 6. And even with that, the Mets needed him so bad they tried anyway. So Mendoza sends him out there for the 6, gets a quick first out, and then he walks John Singleton, and that is his day. And John Singleton, 224 hitter this year with a 651 OPS. Attack him because maybe at John Singleton, is pitched to, he might roll over one. You might get another quick out, and maybe Ty Adcock could have entered the game in the 7th instead of in the 6th. And then that might get you 3 outs closer, or whatever it is, 2 outs closer even. Adcock was great. That's the one reliever that you can say that about on Saturday. He got the Mets out of that 6th inning, got them through the 7th, got 5 outs without walking a batter, allowed just 1 hit, 1 strikeout. Really good performance by him. Might be enough that he can avoid getting optioned after it, even though he threw a lot of pitches. We'll be talking about how the Mets are going to get around their bullpen issues in the final segment today, because they are very tired with no off days in sight. So we'll go through that later. But the Mets still needed 6 more outs. Almost at the finish line, and they just didn't have enough. Jake Diekman comes on, walks the first 2 batters that he faces, got a strikeout, got a ground out to put runners in scoring position. But those first 2 walks are going to kill you. They always do. Carlos Mendoza goes to Reed Garrett, trying to get out of that jam at least. I don't know if he was trying to get 4 outs out of Garrett, but he's just trying to piece it together. You can't really blame Mendoza too much with the cards that he's been dealt. Garrett comes on. He walks the first batter that he faces, throws a wild pitch that scores a run, walks another batter to load the bases again, and then gives up a hit to Alex Bregman that officially blows the lead. So between Diekman and Garrett, 4 walks. 4 walks is just unacceptable. But these guys are pitching on back-to-back days. And I think part of that could have been avoided a little bit. Regardless, doesn't matter. We'll talk about that in the next segment as far as where I believe the Mets mismanaged their roster this week. Danny Young came in to get Garrett out of the jam. He got Yordan Alvarez out, but then he gave up some runs of his own in the 9th inning. And it just got out of reach for the Mets, where they couldn't come back into a game that they had already won as a lineup. So where do the Mets go from here with Tylor Megill in this bullpen? They have already made the decision to option him, but I think that is a decision that was made about 5 days too late. I want to talk about that more in the next segment. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs have now winded down in the NBA and the NHL, there's fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where I send you updates anytime some news breaks on the Mets. So tonight, when it was announced by Anthony DiComo that Tylor Megill would get optioned to AAA, I let the insiders know first. You can also ask me questions anytime, and you can also get the lineup graphic, or you will get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day, so you don't have to go on social media to find out who is starting for the Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. For those of you who've been listening to this show throughout the past week, I was wondering day after day after Megill's last start why he was not optioned out of the rotation. Because there was an off day on Monday and an off day on Thursday, it made all the sense in the world to get an extra arm in your bullpen especially after the news of Edwin Diaz getting suspended after that whole thing happened on Sunday. It made it even more evident. I was talking about option Megill on the Sunday show last week, a week from today. I was mentioning, hey, why not grab a ninth arm for the bullpen? And then it was like, oh, well, now you have a chance to still have a full bullpen for this week. Granted, the Mets front office proved me wrong originally because throughout the series against the Yankees, the Subway Series, the Mets didn't really need an extra reliever. They were rested on the front end of that. On the back end of it, they were fine. And I guess they wanted to evaluate Tylor Megill through one more start. There is a pattern that I think I might have keyed in on, and you never know if these things are down to a science or not, but all executives have their little, methodology, their little, checkpoints that they like to hit if they're trying to make an evaluation. There's things that they like to do when it comes to how they look at their talent. I think there might be something, and I could be wrong, about wanting a starter to get 7 turns through a rotation to make an evaluation on them. The reason I say that, Adrian Hauser, 7 starts. That's what he's made this year. Now, granted, 6 of them were in the rotation. Then he had some relief appearances, and then he made a spot start. But I feel like that spot start was a little bit of an audition of, oh, maybe you might still be able to be a starter. When that start didn't go well, it was all right. You're in the bullpen for probably the rest of the season. Jose Budo made 7 starts, started walking guys at the end of it based on how the roster was set up. It just made sense at the time to option him. He got optioned down to get some more work in Syracuse to really be put on ice almost. And also because you had guys like Megill coming back. Now, this was Megill's 8th start of the season, but his first one was prior to an IL stint. So since he's come back, this was his 7th start. Maybe the Mets really wanted to evaluate him one more time. And granted, in the long run, maybe that is all for the best. It's hard for me to sit here and be like, oh, I know more than David Stearns in the Mets front office. I'm not saying that. But what I would say is if I was in that front office, right? If I was an analyst or whatever it is, and I was part of the conversation about what the Mets plan to do, I would have been advocating for Tylor Megill to be sent down last week, last Sunday, or even Monday this past week here to, one, allow you to have your best guys going in the series against the toughest team on your schedule before the All-Star break. So that would have meant having Luis Severino start one of the first 2 games. That would have meant David Peterson starting in this series as well on Sunday. And knowing that you could still go to Christian Scott or Jose Budo in this upcoming week, which the Mets might do anyway now. But you would have had an extra arm in your bullpen through that whole time. And you also would have started the clock on Tylor Megill being able to be reinserted back into this rotation if you need a spot starter during this period between now and the All-Star break, where maybe the Mets don't want to roll with the traditional 6-man rotation. Or is a 6-man rotation ever traditional? Regardless, a 6-man rotation because of Christian Scott potentially coming back into the fold. So it made all the sense in the world. The Mets didn't do it. Tylor Megill has a bad start. Their bullpen is taxed all the hell. And to me, it just feels like something that could have been avoided. Does an extra arm win you the game on Saturday in that bullpen? Probably not. If Cole Sulser's in that bullpen, do they win the game? No. But if Luis Severino makes that start, I think they do win the game. And you could say, well, Sevy's probably going to win the game on Sunday. You don't know that. You don't know the Mets lineup, even if it is a bullpen game for the Astros, which as far as I've seen, that is the plan at this point, unless Hunter Brown is going to get the nod. But regardless, maybe the Mets have a cold day offensively. And you wouldn't know that going in, but to me, it just made the most sense to have that reliever the whole week and to option Megill off of what we saw last Saturday, which was a guy that just wasn't quite good enough right now. They chose not to do it. Maybe they wanted that evaluation period, and now that they have made that evaluation, he will get optioned. All right, so what does that mean moving forward? Well, Gary Cohen on the broadcast mentioned that Christian Scott could be getting the ball on Tuesday. So if they're going to do that, essentially what you're looking at as far as the road ahead, you got Severino pitching on Sunday. Hopefully he can deliver a victory to the Mets. David Peterson to open up the series against the Nationals. Then you would have Christian Scott breaking up him and Sean Manaea in the rotation. Manaea would then be bumped to Wednesday. You go back around to Jose Quintana to close out that series. then Severino in Pittsburgh, Peterson, and then you have to make a decision on Christian Scott. Is he able to go in a 5-man rotation, or do you need to add a 6th starter? Jose Budo would be available if they wanted to. They could slide him into the rotation really at any point starting on Friday or even before that. I think he started on Friday in Syracuse, so probably be available to go as soon as Thursday even. So you can make your decisions on what you want to do. Maybe you want to break up all the lefties. So maybe you want to go to just a 6-man rotation at that point that is Severino, Peterson, Scott, Manaea, Budo, Quintana. That might be the way they do it. So it's left, right, left, left. I mean, and that makes a lot of sense, and it all can work out. I still just feel like the Mets made a mistake by not getting Megill out of the rotation sooner and also starting his clock, because if you want to have an extra arm in your bullpen, but Christian Scott can't pitch on 4 days rest, you could have navigated this time period where you could have gone with that ace spot in your bullpen. On the days that you need a spot starter, you could have plugged in Jose Budo for one and then Tylor Megill for the other one and gotten through this stretch without needing to go to a 6-man rotation. Maybe the Mets want to. And coming out of the break, they're going to have another stretch where it's 13 games in 13 days, I believe. So they might need a 6-man for that. So maybe the plan all along was get to July, remove either Megill or Peterson, and go to a 6-man. If that's the case, hopefully it works out for the Mets. We'll see exactly how it all shakes. But I feel like there was a missed opportunity this week. And it was like all the worst fears that we had sort of talked about were realized in that game on Saturday where the bullpen was taxed and Megill didn't go deep enough. Hopefully, Christian Scott and or Jose Budo, when they enter the fold, start to give the Mets length out of their rotation. Because if they do go to a 6-man, you need these starters going 6. Because you're going to have one less arm to play with in that bullpen. And they won't go to a 6-man until they get Diaz back. So that's the thing. But based on how everything lines up, they're able to comfortably do that. So we'll see exactly what the plan is with the rotation moving forward. Maybe the Mets will make an announcement on Sunday about the rotation ahead here. If Scott is indeed going to start on Tuesday, or if maybe they push him to Wednesday, keep Peterson, Manaea in line. We'll see exactly what they do there. But the bottom line is Tylor Megill is out. We expect to see some new faces join this rotation in the upcoming week. And the bullpen still has a lot that they have to figure out here to get through this series and just get through this stretch without Diaz. So that's what I want to talk about next here. What is the roadmap on Sunday? Who's going to join this bullpen? Who's on their way out? I'll talk about all that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here with Locked On Mets, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, the playoffs. It's year-round. Do you know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts. It can even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. You can also just see the link in the episode description below. If you want to stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Now, I promised you guys a farm report on the show today talking about the top position players in the Mets system. I'm just going to rapid fire this because there's a lot to talk about with this bullpen. So I'll tell you that Ryan Clifford is sporting a very interesting line in AA. He's hitting 175 with a 356 on base and a 482 slug. 9 home runs in 37 games, OPS over 800. It is an interesting way to go about getting your numbers, sort of 3 true outcome-ish there with the strikeouts, walks, and home runs. I don't actually think his strikeout rate is that absurd, but the walks certainly are, and he's not getting a lot of hits outside of the home run. So we'll see. He's going to be a AA the rest of the year. I think that's a guy that you look at his final season when it's all said and done, and then you can really evaluate what the Mets might have there with Clifford. Luis Acuna has his season average over 270, OPS over 700. Now, a lot of Mets fans want to see this guy up. I don't think we'd see that until after the trade deadline. If Acuna plays a role in this team, I think it actually isn't even until the rosters expand. And then in September, he can be a speed demon who would get some starts, but really be a guy that comes off the bench, gets a big steal, can play good defense for you in multiple spots. He's a guy that could be a real Swiss Army knife for the Mets this season, but I think he needs to get as much development as possible with his bat in AAA. I'm glad he's had a really good June. I want to see a great July out of him before the Mets call him up. Go to high A, you got Nick Morabito, who has been slumping a little bit lately. We'll see how long that continues. Morabito, one of the top outfield prospects in this system. Jesus Baez, the last time we did a farm report talking about the hitters, I mentioned how Baez was crushing in Port St. Lucie and might get promoted soon. Sure enough, he was up there this week, up in Brooklyn, that is in high A, went 6 for 21 in his first 5 games at the level with a home run and 2 doubles. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of guys that are shortstop prospects in the Mets system. Baez was moved over to third base in St. Lucie. I didn't check to see where he's playing positionally now with Brooklyn, but a guy that has now maybe separated himself a little bit from the pack that also includes Colin Houck, Jeremy Rodriguez, Marco Vargas, a lot of other guys. Speaking of Houck, he had a good week this week, as did AJ Ewing and Boston Barrow in St. Lucie, along with Ron Hernandez. We'll talk about those guys at a little more length on a show where I have more time to really dive into the hitters in this system. It's definitely a system that more favors the pitching right now, but there are some good bats that we will continue to monitor throughout the year. So let's go into this bullpen now. Jake Diekman and Reed Garrett both pitched back-to-back days on Saturday, so they're burned for Sunday. Don't think they'll be available. Daniel Nunez threw, I think, over 30 pitches on Friday night, and I was checking his game logs. Typically, when he goes 2 or 2+ in particular, he gets at least 2 days off after that. So I don't know if Nunez is available either on Sunday. He might not be good to go until Monday. So who is available? Adrian Hauser threw 44 pitches on Wednesday. I'd imagine he's good to go after 3 days rest. Adam Ottavino did not pitch on Saturday. Those are the 2 guys I can tell you for sure are available for this game after Luis Severino. So you need length from him. I think plan A for the Mets, if all breaks right, is Luis Severino would give the Mets 7 innings. They would have a Hauser bridge to Ottavino, and Ottavino's closing it, or maybe Hauser looks good and he pitches the final 2 innings. They would piecemeal it together. Ideally, I guess, plan A is Sevy goes 7 and the Mets score like 10 runs, and you just have Hauser mop up the rest of the outs, and you just close off this series and hopefully give your bullpen a day rest. But all good plans get foiled, and for all we know, Severino won't give you length, and then you're in trouble. So what do the Mets do with this bullpen? Ty Adcock threw 23 pitches in this outing today, but he looked really good. Danny Young threw 25 pitches. Hasn't looked good since he's come back. I got egg on my face a little bit on Danny Young. I went to bat for him. Hasn't pitched well lately. I think he's heading right back down to Syracuse. That one I would almost guarantee. Megill also heading to Syracuse. So that right there gives you 2 spots. I also want to note, as I was trying to find what relievers could come up, I looked at today's starter, and it was Joey Lucchesi. He went 6 1/3. Just saying. And he allowed just 2 runs, by the way, with 8 strikeouts, 1 walk. Let's go through the options. You got Josh Walker. Hasn't pitched since the 26th, so a couple days off. He would be fresh for an outing. Matt Festa and Cole Sulser both have not pitched since the 25th. Those are the 3 guys I would look at here. Josh Walker has been up and down throughout this season. He has a 5.11 ERA in the big leagues. In Syracuse, he's been lights out. 1.61 ERA. In June, he has not allowed a run or a hit. He's allowed 1 hit. I gave him a little too much credit, but only 1 hit in 7 1/3 innings pitched with 14 strikeouts, 6 walks. I imagine Josh Walker is going to take Danny Young's place. So I think we can almost just lock that in. The question then becomes, do you bring up both Festa and Sulser and option Adcock, or do you keep Adcock and then choose between one of the 2? I think Adcock pitched well enough that you'd hold on to him. So I'd imagine it's going to be one of Festa or Sulser, and I'd make the case that it should be Matt Festa. Now, the Mets picked him up, and since coming over, he has a 1.76 ERA with a 0.91 whip in 11 appearances in Syracuse across 15 and a third innings pitched. And he has gotten multiple innings on various occasions. So he's more of a bulk guy than Sulser. Sulser has been pitching 1 inning spurts down in AAA. So I think Festa makes more sense considering the state of your bullpen. Sulser is on the roster. That's the one sort of edge he has on Festa. But the Mets can clear up ample room on their 40 right now. They have Brooks Raley, still not on the 60-day IL, and they have Drew Smith, still not on the 60-day IL. Those two guys can easily get moved over, and you can make room for a Festa. So I think Josh Walker and Festa come up. But there is a world where they option not only Megill and Danny Young, but also Ty Adcock, and then all 3 of them come up. You have 3 fresh arms to slide into your bullpen, which might just be the move because you just have to figure out however you can get by. That's the best thing for this team. So we'll see. If the Mets ever needed Luis Severino to give them length, it is in this outing on Sunday. And we'll see exactly. Let me look up really quick and see if the Astros announced the starter, just in case there is information out there that I have not keyed in on. Sean Dubin is the projected starter. So it's a bullpen game. It's a bullpen game. Dubin has been pitching out of their bullpen and has a 5.64 ERA on the season. So bullpen game with your ace on the mound. Hopefully the Mets can deliver and get a series victory, keep things rolling before they hit the road and head back to DC. I'll be breaking down what lies ahead against the Nationals as well as whatever happens on Sunday on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you who tune in. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, the new goal is not only to get to 9,000 subs, but get to it by the All-Star break. We are really close. We're within 200, so please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. If you want to follow me on X, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. We got subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube. Check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Of course, I'm talking about Locked On Sports Today, which is also streaming 24/7 on Amazon Fire TV.